Okay. All right. Okay. So, well, thank you, Justin, again for uh, uh, basically for part two of our conversation. And I really enjoyed the first one we got, and I think uh, I feel like we need talk to do this part two because I think both of us actually came to a conclusion, which is something we for definitely in my case I did not expect that, and in many ways I didn't want that.
Mm,
And it's basically we're saying the problem is the system, is not the we don't have qualified teachers, or teachers are not paid enough. We have too many students and not enough money in school, and those are I mean those are problems, but those are not the fundamental problems. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And one of the things that I have tried to make a point of in my advocacy, especially in this last year or so of the pandemic, is I am hopeful of what the pandemic has brought in terms of at least raising awareness of what is going on in schools. But I don't want to get sidetracked by the tentacles of the octopus, right?
Right.
Yes, we need to address mask mandates and whether or not vaccine mandates, and we need to address critical race theory, and we need to address social
Right.
emotional learning. But we also need to keep our eye on the fact that at the foundation, I always talk about this when I teach Sunday school. When you build a house, right? If you don't have the foundation proper, everything else that you do is fruitless.
Right.
It's futile. And so our foundation of the public school system is built on sand. And if you've ever
Exactly.
tried to build on sand, you know how unstable it is. So yes, let's talk about these things, but then let's also make sure that we are addressing the problem at large.
Right. Yeah. So in a ways that it's not. I mean, we see maybe a, a door frame is crooked,
Hmm.
or a window is kind of has some maybe the cracks on the on the wall, and I mean those are problems, right?
Hmm.
But the real problem is, like you said, the foundation is on the sand. The foundation itself is the problem. uh, yeah, but how did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, so I think kind of like we mentioned in part one, I looked around at the buildings that I was in my time in the public school system. And I kind of did like you said. I looked around, I said, I see some good teachers, I see some bad teachers. But I know that can't be the reason why we're getting the results that we're getting, by and large for over 150 years. I looked at the resources in the classroom and I said, no, it can't be that.
Right.
I looked at what was being taught and I thought, okay, there is some valuable stuff in this curriculum. But then the more and more I just kept digging into it, I just got this gut feeling that said it's the compulsive nature of the system that forces kids into these individual classrooms, whether you use block scheduling or a traditional schedule. Let's say a student has on average 4 to 8 classes depending on the setup of the school, that we're forcing them into these classrooms at an hour to an hour and a half or however long at a time, 5 days a week, 180 days a year, 12 years out of their life. And then they come out of this and we go, okay, what did we gain from this? And it's
Right.
very clear, as we talked about in part one, that the evidence is overwhelming that it's failing our children. It's
Right.
not preparing them to be productive citizens. And that's the other thing too, is that even when I talk to some of the most staunch supporters of public schools, one of the first kind of objections that they raise to why we need public schools is they will say, well, we need an educated citizenry. To which I say, but we don't have an educated citizenry again, by and large,
Right.
yes, the system does work well for some people. But then again, you could even argue, what is that success supposed to look like?
Right.
If you graduate from high school, go to college, get your degree, work for a corporate, entity for X number of years, and you're able to live, the middle class dream and whatnot. Does that still mean that you were educated the right way?
Hmm.
That I think there's a piece missing in there,
Right.
and that's kind of how I came to that conclusion.
I see. But that was what you mentioned there. That was the measuring stick, isn't it? Like the kids go to college and get
Hmm.
into the middle school. I mean, at least uh, for most parents and teachers, and that's how they measure,
Hmm.
right? Like I used to teach in a college prep school, and that's all we do is to
Hmm.
get the kids ready for college. But so, and you are saying it's not the right measuring stick.
No, no, not in my opinion. And in fact, I have kind of led a little bit of a crusade, I guess, as much as
Mm,
I can, to say that I think we are doing a huge disservice with how many of our children we are pressuring into feeling as though they need to attend a four-year institution. And you can look at the current crisis that we're in with the debt, the
right.
student debt crisis. And I think a lot of that is attributed to kids who feel lost. There was a story that the Wall Street Journal put out this past week about young adult males in this country and how they feel lost.
Right.
And it's this sense of like, what am I pursuing? What am I going after? The ancient Greeks used to reflect on this, right?
Right. Right.
Aristotle leading the good life, and they seriously wrestled with this, and now we just dumb it down to okay, we need to go to school, we need to get good grades, we need to get a job so we can learn some job skills, we go to college. And I think there's so many of our kids, and listen, this is valuable capital in our society, and that
Hmm.
that age of worker is valuable in the marketplace, but they feel trapped inside these institutions, and they're paying $45,000 a year to get a general ed studies degree. And even if they are in a more fruitful program, some of them are miserable. Some of them have felt pressured into going into that area when really, they could enter into a vocational program,
Right. Right.
get on the job, go into some kind of apprenticeship program, and not feel like they have to, for example, get an engineering degree when they could go and apprentice and become an HVAC technician, when really that's what they want to do, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we see a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Like in my case, I was. Uh, I mean, I have the same experience and see the cracks and all that, and also, uh, we know the problem. I mean, the kids are not prepared, but
Hmm.
uh, there's nothing you can do about it. And I think for me, really is uh, John Gato's book that kind of pointed me in the right direction,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
he was
Yeah.
talking about the problem is the compulsory schooling. I mean, I think we need to make a distinction of which you have been making, that is that there's a difference between schooling and education. And what we are trying to say that, oh yes, they have the schooling part, but they don't have the education part. And
Yeah, that's
actually,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
actually the system is not about education. The system is about the schooling.
Yeah, and when you really, and again, that kind of goes back to the larger point of the system being the problem, is that when we look at what are the achievable outcomes, go back to the Prussian model, what
All
we
right.
talked about in part one. It was to create docile citizens who would follow directives and
Mm,
orders,
mm,
and even we hear that language embedded in how people justify the system today. I saw a lifelong educator on Twitter the other day, who somebody had mentioned, this idea of school choice, and being able to allow kids and families to leave situations that aren't, what they would want.
Mm,
And basically his message was, you suck it up. You can't always get what you want. In other words, be happy with where you are,
right.
right? And they don't want you to think about an opportunity that's out there that could make you better than where you are. They want you to follow directions. They don't want you to question things. They want you to be able to take directives, do what you're told, and not kind of think independently and freely. They want to break that will and spirit to want to do that. And, look, I even sometimes am guilty of that, with my children when as a parent, it's like, just do what I'm saying, right?
Right.
I don't have time to give you a treatise on why I want you to clean up your room. Just clean up your room. But my point is and remains, though, that I think, after, again, so many years of the public school system, we end up getting graduates who are conditioned to
Right.
do what they're told and not think independently and freely.
Exactly. And that's actually what I see and what I hear from employers
Hmm.
is that a lot of kids nowadays, you have to basically uh, tell them what to do.
Yeah,
And
and the school system tries to pay lip service to this, because one of the big things that I noticed kind of coming to the forefront in terms of educational pedagogy and
mm,
practices was things like thinking outside the box, group work, thinking creatively, multiple intelligences.
right, right.
These things had been used before, but they had come back full
Yeah,
circle.
yep,
And it was as a result of what they were hearing from, the schools and from employers about skills that were needed. But ultimately, it wasn't producing any fruit. It was just, as I said, lip service. It
right.
was.
Yeah,
It wasn't,
definitely.
actually.
Yeah, it sounds good, but
Right.
not
Exactly.
really doing the work. I mean, what the school does, which is it can do very effectively, and that's also what it's designed for, is to basically train them to be obedient
Hmm.
followers. You just
Hmm.
tell, I mean, here's a standard answer, you do it. If you do the right way, I mean, which means you follow our instructions and
Hmm.
get the right answer, then you get rewarded. And
Yeah.
and if you deviate from that, then you know, you get punished for it.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And you had mentioned John Taylor Gatto earlier, and in part one, I in passing mentioned
Right,
in the beginning of, I believe it's Dumbing Us Down.
right.
He mentions the seven
7 things,
lesson.
yeah.
Yeah, and he
Mm.
talks a lot about that in that passage. Yep.
Right, yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, like as a, you know, former engineer, I was trying to solving problems, right?
Hmm.
Is trying to looking for the root cause. So one of the things you have to looking for is that what is the purpose of a system, and well, I mean, for whom the system was designed,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And if you look at that, like what you in your book, the system came is not really for the kids,
Hmm.
and definitely not for the parents. It
Yeah,
is
and that's really frustrating. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no,
That's really frustrating, because I see a lot of people who are anti-school choice that, and I've gotten this personally in criticism as well. They see people who are pro school choice, and they think free market. We use that language, the free market, and then they immediately equate that into like, for example, charter schools just wanting to
mm,
turn profits, and it's not about the kids. And they always try to indicate that public schools always have the kids at the center of everything, but they don't.
they
As you
don't.
just said, they don't.
Right, and like what you mentioned, like when the Prussia, uh, the Prussian school system is because they need uh, uh, educated but obedient
Hmm. Hmm.
citizens,
Hmm.
and so that they can, you know, as you said, they lost to the French.
Hmm.
So
Right.
so the way they're trying to come back is okay. We need to have. I mean, the soldiers are not really obeying the orders, so we need to have that. And you actually do see that the result during the Second World War, and the German soldiers are so obedient, and
Mm-hmm.
they're willing just to do whatever it mean. mean, even though it's kind of suicide, but it just follow the water because that has been wired somehow uh, into their mental state, because that's
Mhm.
what school does to you, right?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's a conditioning mechanism.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, and also too, to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, we have identified and talked a lot about the role of the government, obviously as the main agent of controlling and running public schools. But it's also important to note too, and I point this out in my book. This is out of page 79 in Failure, that I'm kind of referencing back again to Gatto in particular. This time, weapons of mass instruction,
mm,
where he includes a segment. He talks a lot about the role that early industrial tycoons had
right, right.
in having a hand in shaping what the
Yeah,
school would look
Rockefeller
like.
and
Mhm, yes.
Kennedy,
Carnegie, yeah.
Carnegie,
And
yeah,
so he has this Rockefeller General Education Board statement.
right.
I won't read it word for word, but I do want to read just a quick excerpt from it. It says, to begin, in our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. And I
Hmm.
think that's a really powerful and telling statement about, as you were talking about, they want educated citizens, but they want those who are going to be obedient and will be able to be molded into the type of worker slash citizen that they want them to be.
Right. And actually, that was one of the reasons we have bell running in schools,
Yeah, yeah,
because we
absolutely. Yep.
want to make them so that when they started working in the assembly lines,
hmm
they can follow instructions.
hmm
And of
Yeah.
course, as soldiers, you also follow that too,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes you don't even think. It's just like
hmm
when the bell rings, you just get up and walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
probably
and we
don't.
s- and we see this a lot in our society. I mean, look at where
Right,
we are today. We see so many people saying, just do it, just do
right,
this,
right.
just do that, just do that. Don't question it, don't think about it, just
Mm-hmm.
follow directions. And if you don't, then there will be a punishment that comes along with that.
Consequences, right?
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah. And one of actually another thing uh, I can uh, think the system is the problem is that um, I I know a lot of entrepreneurs
hmm
that none of them had a good experience doing school,
hmm
because it's kind of the compulsory schooling system actually is against. I mean, it's detrimental to
hmm
entrepreneurs. It's not the environment for making entrepreneurs. So if
No,
you are
not at all.
so if you are entrepreneur spirit, normally, at least I mean, so far I know quite a lot. Those small business, I mean, people, entrepreneurs, and people can think outside box,
hmm
and none of them actually had good experience doing in school. And and it's because they didn't do well in school that somehow can make them what they are.
Yeah, and you almost kind of wonder if they had stuck through it, or I know there's a lot of great examples of entrepreneurs, business people who have been gone on to be very successful,
Mhm.
who were either not successful in school or just flat out dropped out
Right.
of school to pursue these passions. And you just wonder, like, if the grip on them would have been stronger, they may not have turned into the people that they turned into. And on that topic, I was sitting at a local Jiffy Lube today getting my oil changed. And as I was sitting there, they were repaving the asphalt around
Mm.
the building. And there was a young boy who was working with the crew. I mean, he could have been no more than maybe 13 years old.
Oh wow.
And my immediate thought was, he should be in school. And then I almost immediately after that thought, he's probably learning more doing
Amen.
this than he would
Amen.
be sitting through an entire day of school. And
Yeah.
he did. He had a shovel and he was right there shoveling
Right.
asphalt and helping out. And I thought, boy, how many lessons are being learned just in this 15-minute period that I saw.
Right.
Communication, responsibility, organization, time management, work ethic. I mean, on and on it goes. And again, you're not going to be able to touch learning any of that to
No,
the
no, no,
level of which
no.
he was getting in that period of time.
Yeah, and just I think you see that probably see the same thing. I mean, I see a lot of kids today. They learn the things just watch a YouTube. I mean, they
Mhm.
learn things outside the school. It's not in the school.
That's right. And that's one of the things I tell my students from day one when I'm teaching either government or economics or US history or whatever it might be. I'm very honest with my students when I say there is nothing factual that that I can teach you that you can't learn online.
Right,
You could go watch a lecture on the same exact topic or watch a YouTube video or whatever. My job is to challenge you on how to think about these things.
right,
And
right,
that's where I think we are really failing as a public school system. And I know that there are people within the system who believe in the system who lament that, who think that there's an opportunity for schools to turn this thing around. But I think that boat has sailed, and
right.
it's never going to be able to be anything like that.
No, no, no. I think what changed in a way, well, I think a couple of things. One thing is that the economy has changed,
Absolutely.
and so we don't need people just being white collar,
Hmm.
sit in front of computers and just type in the numbers. We
Hmm.
don't need that anymore. And so that's why you see a lot of college graduates, uh, they they couldn't find really a good paying job. And so basically their education really didn't benefit them. But they have a huge student debt.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
on the other hand, if you go to like engineering and all that, I mean, there's plenty of job out there.
Hmm.
So so definitely there's a change. In the past, I mean, once you got a college degree, you pretty much guaranteed to have a job and to have a middle class lifestyle.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that's no
Yeah.
longer the
Absolutely.
case anymore. But the school, all the school can do, and I mean, even though it didn't, I mean, it's still failing on that, but that's what school designed for, is to push them to college. Well,
Hmm.
in uh, the not the nice word is prepare them to college,
Right. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, but that's that's not uh, that's uh, that's not going to work anymore.
No, it's not. And I think we need to do, as I mentioned earlier, a much better job of identifying and allowing children the opportunity, especially as they progress, on through high school and prepare for the adult world, to have more autonomy and freedom to choose and not feel the pressure. I mean, the pressure is real. It comes from family, it comes from guidance counselors, teachers, other adults,
Right.
to feel this need that if you're going to be successful at anything in life, you have to have a college degree. And again, I think that there are some people out there that are trying to dispel that myth,
Mhm.
and say that, hey, you can go to a 2-year program, you can go to an apprenticeship type program, learn on the job skills, take a gap year, even, for
Right, right,
example.
right.
That's
Yeah.
a popular thing now, and
Mhm.
just kind of figure things out a little bit before you just immediately hop in, because the stakes are high.
Yeah.
You're talking student loan and debt, and you're
Right,
not
right,
working
right.
and everything. And so with that, the ramifications being so large, let's think about this. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too, and I'm sure you were maybe going to talk a little bit about this as well, is, yes, the primary task being to prepare them for their adult lives, but what we're really seeing now is even more of another turn in education, to not only, and I would say moving away from preparing students to enter into the adult world, but now turning them into activists.
Exactly. That's the second point
Hmm.
I wanted to say. Exactly, I agree on that. That's something like uh, uh, the parents need to know, because
Hmm.
like I didn't know, like just a couple months ago. That's I kind of uh, like the critical race theory. I mean, everybody think. I mean, it's basically it's in starting law school, and they went to education school and other schools.
Hmm.
But I did not realize that it has pretty much controlled the whole higher education, the ideology, which
Hmm.
is a neo-Marxism,
Hmm.
that has controlled. I mean, that's basically that's what Jordan Peterson has been saying,
Hmm.
and people like that, they called humanists.
Hmm.
I mean, all the classical liberals. I mean, they are not even Christians. They are not even conservatives,
Mm.
and they actually see the same thing. What's happening because they also being attacked. But that's what the Marxism does. The
Hmm.
Marxism, by its nature, is going to destroy the uh, Western civilization, the liberal tradition. So that's even like you mentioned that now not only uh, you send your kids to college and then they didn't get the education and with student debt, and now they turn into a communist. So what's
Yeah.
going to handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's yet another reason why we should maybe shun the notion of shoveling our children off to these
Right,
universities, which are just completely run amok. And I know that it seemed like when I went through school, there was this notion that there were certain departments within the university that were maybe more liberal and some
right,
that were more conservative. But now it just seems like this stuff has crept into all disciplines
right,
on college campuses.
right.
And here's the thing that ought to frighten parents, in particular, and prospective students who may be listening to this as well. When you're considering and thinking about, I would highly encourage you to look at the just complete silencing of voices on college campus, not for just from students, but from professors. We now are seeing an exodus of college
Right.
professors who are being forced out or willing to leave on their own.
Hmm.
Peter Boghossian up at Portland State
Right. Yeah.
just resigned his position. He, along with James Lindsay, Dr. James Lindsay from Middle Tennessee State, he does a lot of great work. Helen Pluckrose, those three, I think, were the ones that did the studies program where they wrote fake
Right.
pieces that they got published in
Right. Right.
articles, and they were trying to point out the hypocrisy. But it's
Right.
even been taken up the next level, even since that now almost a decade ago, to the point where these people are sounding alarm bells, and on the way out the door they're saying, you guys need people in society that are consuming education at the higher level need to be aware of what's going on. And
Yeah.
that, of course, is trickling down, because who prepares our educators?
Right.
College professors.
Yep.
When I went through the transition to teaching program at IUPUI, I got gender studies, I got race studies, I got all of these things that we hear about, and it was hammered in to my mind that the white males are the root of everything that is
Yeah.
evil in
Right.
education. And of
Hmm.
course, now it's everything in society.
Right.
It's just blown up tenfold since I got out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a big issue.
Right. As I mentioned, I think I told you in part one, like when my wife went to IU Bloomington for her master's degree in education, and they have professors. They, they I mean, they are pretty open. They are Marxists,
Hmm.
and also they got professors told them that their job is to make social activists.
Hmm.
It's not about education anymore.
Nope.
Yeah. So in the past, maybe you were still trying to educate, or at least give them uh, enough education so that I can go to college. But now that's not the case. And we see something happening, in the West Coast, some kind called what do you call that? Uh, uh, Grading
Yes.
inequity, something
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm. Yes.
And so, and and that's basically they don't care if they are not learning anything, as long as they believe in this, you know, um, you know, the racial struggle.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
basically,
listen,
yeah,
look, the governor of Oregon came out earlier this
right,
year and basically said, we're getting rid of standards.
yeah,
Kids can graduate without having shown any proficiencies. You have school districts in the state of Virginia that say they're going to be eliminating
AP
honors
classes,
courses,
yeah,
AP classes, accelerated classes because of equity. And it goes on and on and on. And again, yes, to your point, and I know there's a couple of other people within some of the groups that we're affiliated with who have have been sounding the alarm bells too about, you guys normally here in the Midwest think about this being out on the coasts, but it's infiltrating into the Midwest. We see
Exactly.
it all the time in different
Exactly.
places.
Yeah.
There was a story of out of Baltimore a number of years ago where they touted something along the lines like a 96 to 97% graduation rate, and there were kids that never attended a single class
Right.
that were awarded a diploma.
Yeah.
So basically what they're doing is they're saying they're not even, hiding it anymore. They're
No.
just outright saying our job is not to try to educate children anymore. It is, we get them, we can mold them, as the quote I read said earlier, the teachers now who have been radicalized in these
Right. Right.
universities, and now they've got the media on their side. They've got, certain
Mm-hmm.
governments that are now on their side. It used to be that we could at least look to a state government or a local government to protect us from this, but now
No.
we have mayors and governors
No.
who are buying into this. So we're really starting to stand on the last leg of
Yeah.
defending free market capitalism,
Right.
democracy, Republican democracy, as we've known it. And I worry sometimes about that, honestly.
Yeah, like for example, our state, conservative state, we
Mm-hmm.
have this a DEI director,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she got paid more than more than the governor. So, but
Yeah, and individual school
yeah,
corporations now are hiring
right,
people and
right,
going through this. And there's been a lot of dust up in some of the bigger school districts in our state in
yeah,
terms of
right,
school boards with parents and
yeah,
whatnot. And
yeah. Kamal Clay has the DEI
Mhm.
director,
Yep.
but they are just pushing that. I mean, the only reason I can think of is those administrators, those teachers, they have already been brainwashed.
Hmm.
I mean, otherwise, that whole thing is just ridiculous. To
Well,
say all the white men, I mean, not white men, all the whites are the oppressors, and
mhm,
the people of color are the oppressed.
mhm.
That is Marxist
Yeah.
vocabularies.
Yeah, and I want to harken back to something that you mentioned earlier. You brought up the word humanist, which I think is really important because, in my opinion, and from my observations, the limited amount of observations that I have in my worldview, when we look at what has led to this, if people genuinely studied Marx and Engels and
Mhm.
Lenin and Stalin and Mao and so on and so forth, they would see how evil the ideology is. But what has happened is embedded in that humanistic worldview, probably more than, well, not probably, beyond logic, is
Right.
it's rooted in emotion.
Mhm.
Emotion is very, very powerful. And I'll give it to the people on the left. They've played that card extremely well because look at what they're saying. They're playing on your emotion. They're saying, look,
Right.
there are people who are struggling. There are people who are being left out. There are people
Mm.
who don't have what others have. And
Mm.
it's not fair that Jeff Bezos gets to launch a
Mm.
rocket up into outer
Right.
space or so on and so forth. Meanwhile, this is the type of rhetoric that you hear from people like Bernie Sanders
Right.
and,
Right.
so on and so forth. And so at a school level, though, right, our educators have been, rooted in that same kind of ideology that it's our job to try to repair the inequalities and the issues that we
Right.
see in the world. And we're going to use this ideology to do it. But you don't understand the evil. I mean, Karl Marx was a horrible, horrible person.
Right.
And how anybody would want to attach themselves to his ideology is beyond me.
Mhm.
And maybe they don't understand that. Maybe they don't know that.
Well,
Maybe.
yeah, just like you said, because it resonated in somehow because we do see injustice in this
Mhm,
world. We do see people get oppressed, right?
mhm,
And we do see people get marginalized. And of course, especially like in the West, we have this Christian tradition, the Judeo-Christian ethics.
mhm.
So, and I mean, so in a way that Marxism only work in the Western civilization. it's harder to work in other countries because in other country natures, I mean, people are not equal. So,
Mm.
so they don't see that injustice, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But you have to have the Judeo-Christian ethics, but then they sneak in that the way to solve the problem is to through the state,
Mhm.
is state to control everything.
Mhm.
So in a way, I wouldn't say they, I mean, well, definitely they give a prescription, right? What's going on? I mean, there is something truth to it. I mean, people are sinful, right?
Mhm.
I mean, definitely there are people who is going to hurt other people.
Mhm.
And so Marx actually attribute that to the capitalists.
Mhm.
So, but the way for him, at least based on, like, I've been kind of rereading Marxism in the past few weeks.
Mhm.
So their solution, that's the thing. Like sometimes, I mean, sounds good, but the solution they provide is actually worse, way worse than
Mm.
the problem. So his solution in that is, well, uh, instead some capitalist control everything, why don't we have a society to control everything?
Mm.
Now that, so who's the society then, right? But they never um, was clear about that. They just say,
Mhm.
okay, this kind of utopian kind of uh,
Mhm.
imagination that there is going to be good people. They'll make up the you know they are, they will run. They are the central planners. They will control everything,
Mhm.
and so I mean they basically work for you, uh, and so instead of the capitalists, now you have the state become the capitalist,
Mhm.
and the state controls everything. But that's only make things even worse,
Right.
right? Now become like everybody is become oppressed.
Mhm.
So, but
Yeah,
that's
and like I tell my government students, we were just talking about this the other day. Where I said it continually amazes me that people who put their faith into the government and government-run
right,
institutions somehow have this feeling or sentiment that once people are elected to government positions, they become enlightened.
right,
That they have all the answers. They're sinful people. They fall short. They err. They, all of the things that you and I struggle with, they struggle with as well. The only difference is they have a lot of power
right,
in terms of being able to make these decisions. And so, and the same thing too, by the way, is true with schools. There's this conceited arrogance, I would say, amongst some in the public school system that teachers somehow possess a bevy of knowledge that
right,
only they can impart on kids. And if you left it up to the parents, people would be walking around running into walls because no one knows how to teach anything. But really, teachers are classroom managers, and they're
right.
they're also prone to err and make lapses in judgment. And we see plenty of issues related to, and I cover this in the book, by the way, mental,
Yep.
verbal,
Hmm.
physical, and sexual abuse by educators all throughout this country on a daily basis.
Yeah, and also I think what's even worse is because their belief of many teachers. I mean, that's what they learned in school. I mean, when they in college, that they know better than the parents,
Hmm.
and because they were trained,
That's
because they
right.
have a degree,
Hmm.
and also they don't think the parents has the authority and responsibility of teaching, educate their kids.
Hmm.
They don't think that's the parents' responsibility. They think that's theirs, which is a very, very dangerous kind of uh, mindset.
Yeah, that's right. And we're seeing increasing rhetoric by people who are in favor of the public education system that are making bold claims about the fact that, parental rights shouldn't exist.
Right.
At least to the extent that they do, if not be eliminated altogether, and that children are, that whole "it takes a village" type mentality. But not, you may agree or disagree with that, but voluntarily versus involuntarily is the key there, right?
Right.
We can rely on other people to help bring our kids up if we voluntarily enter into agreements for that to happen. But when people forcibly seize your children and say they're wards of the state, or
Right.
they're going to face truancy laws, or whatever, that's different, right?
Yeah.
Than saying, yeah, I rely on other people to help raise my children, and it's healthy to do that, but again, only when it's in my opinion done in a voluntary manner.
Right. And that's actually basically that's inherent in this system, right? Means since the very beginning when we start not just America, any other country started compulsory school, is that it's not for the kids, it's not for the parents, it's for the state.
That's right.
Is for the, they same thing. That's why I think one of the reasons that you and I were saying the problem is the system. And if you can just take your kids out of it.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I think toward the end of the book that I wrote,
Right.
Failure, I talk about solutions. And I know we briefly mentioned this in part one, but I do think it is important for parents who may be listening to this, may have listened to part one, maybe kind of putting pieces of the puzzle together that go, okay, I agree with you, Spears, that something is wrong. But okay, so what? Like I work, my husband works,
Right.
my wife works. We've got to have a place for the kids to go during the day. We're too poor, we can't afford, we can't get vouchers, won't cover, whatever. That you have to make a decision about how important this topic is to you, and
Right.
if it really is resonating in your gut enough. And one of the things that I always say along this same line too, by the way, is you only get one shot at educating a human, right? I mean, there's no do-overs. I mean,
Right.
contrary to passing versus holding back and all that stuff, but our kids get one chance at being educated in this life, and so you have to really consider and think about, if your son or daughter is miserable, if they are being let down by the system, if you as a family are being let down, that you can find an accommodation. There are increasingly more and more opportunities and ways of what it looks like to educate humans that are popping up each and every day, that you would be able to find some system or other way of being able to do it and make it work. The one thing that I would highly recommend, if you're in a situation where you are working, because that's one of the very first things that people say when they, I can't afford private school, charter school, I can't do homeschool because we're working, look for a co-op.
Right.
Which I think does a fantastic job of providing some solutions in terms of being able to educate. Now, obviously, as children get older and you develop trust for them to be home alone,
Right.
you can rely more on that. But for the younger ones, look for co-ops that you can be a part of, and take initiative yourself. Look at starting some people refer to them as pandemic pods, learning pods, within your neighborhood, within your county, your city, whatever it might be, that you can, come together with other like-minded families and say, we need to come up with solution.
Right.
What our children are facing each and every day is not only just not productive, it's damaging.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's hurting them, and we don't want to see that any longer.
Yeah, I think this is one thing like John Gato talked about, and you and I definitely experienced that, is that the system suck out any love of learning of the student. I mean, it basically ruined their, in a way, in life. Like for me as a math teacher, I see that. I mean, people just hate math.
Yeah.
It just ruined them, because math is the most powerful tool you can ever have.
Yep.
Now that's it. It's very hard to, like you said, re-educate once they lost the interest.
Yep.
And this is what, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and for those who are, again, considering the move out of public education and are looking at alternatives, I mentioned the book Unschooled
Right,
by Carrie McDonald the other night. She actually has quite a bit of content devoted in that book to parents who withdrew from public schools, who talked about just deschooling,
right,
taking time to like unprogram the child from, let's be honest, the trauma that they had been facing related to being, in schools for so long. So it may take some time to be able to deprogram and get that love of learning back, get somebody
right,
to see the beauty of math, that it exists and there's a way to learn it where you can love it, versus having to go through a regimented curriculum, filling out 35 questions on a worksheet every day.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That there's real world application to it, and that it's all around us, and that we can use it to help learn material better, and all the positive benefits of learning math.
Right. And also there is another option is that if you are a member of a church, you can talk to your pastor
Hmm.
and help, ask your pastor to actually set up something like that. I mean, church is a perfect place
Yeah.
to set up like a micro school or learning
Hmm.
pod and all that. And the one thing also uh, when some parents ask me like, we just not qualified to teach. I mean, my comeback is, if you can teach them how to read, how to write, and how to do arithmetic, the 3 R's, right?
Hmm.
That's good enough. You'll do probably better than most, schools
Hmm.
that can, because we see the statistics, right? You and I, like a lot of high school graduate, they are really just illiterate.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, you mentioned earlier, and I'm glad you brought this back up here. I wanted to make sure I got this in before we concluded. Is again, I want to be very clear in saying there are a tremendous amount of positive role
Hmm.
models, encouraging teachers who are very bright, brilliant innovators, but unfortunately, they're handcuffed by the system,
Right,
right? So their spirits are broken as well,
right.
oftentimes. But what they are trained more in, and again, especially our younger teachers who are entering, and they always talk about how education burnout occurs, how teachers
Mm,
are leaving in droves, and especially our younger teachers. It's because what they're taught how to do is how to manage
right,
classrooms,
right.
right? You're going to have 25 individual free spirited kids in front of you at any given time. You need to be able to manage that. And
Mm,
here are some tactics and strategies that you can use to manage your classroom. And I'll be humble here for just 1 second, if I may. Very few teachers are what I would say are extremely or adequately even proficient in their content. And listen, I'll be honest,
right.
there have been curriculum that I've been asked to teach where I have felt underprepared because I
Hmm.
didn't get that in my
Right,
education. Instead,
right.
I got how to engage a student, and how to open a class with a bell ringer and a hook, and how to,
Mm,
build a lesson plan from, bell to bell, and
mm.
write learning objectives, and all these other Bloom's taxonomy, and all these other buzzwords, edu-speak words that really are useless when you get down to brass tacks, and you've got a human body sitting across from you, and you have to engage them into learning the content and how to think about the content. At the end of the day, as you said, if you can do that, you're a teacher. Gatto said, any teaching is a function. Anybody with anything to offer is a teacher.
Right.
And if you can offer experience, if you can offer skills, ways of looking at things, you're a teacher. Just because you don't have a diploma or a certificate from the state that says you are licensed as a teacher, all that means is that you haven't had your head filled
Right.
with mush about how to manage children.
Well, and also it become harder and harder, right? In the past, you can discipline uh, some students.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
students, they are trying to make trouble, and that just interfere with learning. You can, you can, at least you can send them out.
Hmm. That's right.
But now it become harder to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. That again, we talked about last part one,
Mm,
how the data that schools are held accountable to in terms of receiving their letter grade from the state. Again, one of those metrics is discipline.
right,
And so increasingly what I saw in my time in education is fewer and fewer referrals, in school suspensions, out of school suspensions, or even expulsions. I mean, I saw instances where had those same things had happened back when I was in school. We saw kids be expelled for that, for the semester or the year.
right,
And now they get a little slap on the wrist and
right, right,
told,
right,
oh,
right,
it's not your fault. You're a product of your environment, or, yada, yada, yada. Everybody here loves you. You're welcome here, instead of addressing the root problem and trying to help, correct that behavior or get the best out of that student.
right,
They're just, again, they just want to keep them in the classroom so they get those dollars.
right. Because from the school perspective, each person has a dollar figure.
That's right.
If they can add more stay in, then so I mean the system is really incentivized in the wrong
Hmm.
way.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. And
Absolutely.
so I'd like to ask you that because we did talk about the difference. Well, at least we alerted to it is the difference between schooling and the education. So, like, what do you think would be the right kind of education?
Hmm. So what I see, especially, again, as a solution, if you were to think about, okay, we can't maybe always rely on public school because of the price, or homeschool because of schedules. Let's just take a look at the actual public school buildings and the system. What could we do to maybe switch that up to keep it viable to where we could keep it open? The first thing that I would say is that every teacher should be a contractor.
Hmm.
Okay. And what I mean by that is you enter into a contract with a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your kid wants to learn about US history. Come to me. I will sell myself to you. I will sell my curriculum. I'll tell you what I'm teaching. And if you accept what I'm putting on the table, then your son or daughter can be a part of my class for this period of time. I think opening up schools to more of an a la carte menu,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of allowing families the choice of what the curriculum should look like, which of course then would desegregate students based on age,
Right.
which, again, there's a lot of research out there that talks about the negative impact of doing that. We oftentimes hear about we have to do that to protect students and so on and so forth, which is a farce. But yeah, I would think that opening up schools, and then I think within that, what you would start to see is schools develop an identity, right? So within like the county that I live in, and I know the county that you're in, there are multiple different high schools that each high school might take on their own flavor or specialty, you might
Right. Right.
say. Maybe this school is geared more towards a mathematics STEM type
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
approach. This school is more of a humanities type school. There's vocational school over here, and you would start to see more fluid movement amongst the students in different communities in terms of how they obtain their education. But my goodness, think about how valuable that would be. Think about how
Right.
jazzed and energized a student might be to have more control over what they're learning, when they're learning it, and how they're learning it.
Yeah, there's something like we haven't addressed that, but you and I actually are very clear on that because that was part of the problem with compulsory schooling is grouping people by their biological age
Hmm.
instead of their mental development. Like,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and that is can ruin. Well, actually has ruined a lot of kids. If you push too early,
Hmm.
uh, they will have bad taste, and they are
Yeah,
not going to learn
absolutely.
after that.
Yeah, and if there's a student who academically isn't prepared to be in your class just because the state of Indiana has said 10th
Right.
graders will take this class,
Yeah.
what they don't have any business being in that class. Let them choose something else. Maybe they'd be much better suited to be in the wood shop or the auto
Mm,
shop or in the home ec classroom or in PE or whatever it might
right.
be. But instead, no, you're told you have to be in this class taking this curriculum, and then they're just bored out of their mind.
Right.
They become a behavior issue. They become stubborn and defiant, all the other issues that pop up. And then we say the teacher doesn't have good classroom management skills.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and on the other side is some kids, even they are young, but they are ready. But
Yes.
then we see a lot of kids actually got bored because they are learning something they already, you know how to do it.
Yeah, and we are
Yeah.
seeing some, I don't know if experiments are the right word, but some test schools where kids are graduating high school with an associate's degree
Mhm.
because they are getting their credits taken care of early. They're academically advanced. They're mature. They're ready
Correct.
to kind of enter into some program that they can get an associate's and maybe a technical license or something. We see this a lot with like nursing, automotive. More like you said, the blue collar type jobs. Because look, we live in a service economy,
Right,
so
right,
there's plenty of jobs out there in that. But yes, they're given the opportunity to complete their high school coursework early, go to Ivy Tech, take some classes while they're
right.
still in high school, and it gives them a leg up as they enter into their adult lives.
Yeah, and something like also uh, I actually volunteer at an organization called Hope Center Indy. So
Yes.
yeah, it's a residential facility for human traffic, for survivors of human trafficking.
Hmm.
And so my responsibility is to help them to get their high school equivalency.
Hmm.
And definitely that's good for them. But I think that's also a good options uh, for high school student.
Hmm.
For some people, they don't have to spend 4 years in high school.
That's right.
They can just get the high school equivalency, then be done with.
Hmm.
And which
Hmm.
actually the high school equivalency has uh, 5 subjects: math, reading and writing, and sciences, and social studies.
Hmm.
And those, if you can pass, I mean, that's good enough.
Hmm.
And as a matter of fact, actually, which is in ways pretty sad, that it's now to pass that test, actually, for a lot of students now, high school students, it's difficult, more difficult than they just go through 4 years of high school.
Hmm.
Because high school, you just, as long as you stay there long enough, you graduate.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I think we need to have serious conversations. You brought up those 5 areas, which a lot again of educators who are proponents of, they talk a lot about having a well-rounded education, which I agree with, but I think there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat with that,
Right.
right? So I know that you in particular have pushed and talked a lot about chess
Mhm.
and the value of playing chess, and there's
Right.
again so much that you can learn from doing that. So let's say maybe you want to take a class on theory behind chess, or more strategic options
Mm.
with that. Again, maybe it's a young lady who is interested in cooking or homemaking, or even STEM engineer. It doesn't matter. There could be any number of these different programs out there.
Right, right.
There could be core coursework, but then we need to open up opportunities for application. We need to provide courses that allow the students to not just learn theory, but then application behind what they're learning,
Yeah.
and how much more interesting it might be for them to be able to, instead of maybe having a project embedded into their class, they could take an entire class on a particular subject or topic or whatever that might be. How much, again, more energized they would be to want to learn.
Right. I mean, I think for that, there is something like uh, really up to the parents. The parents, in a way, has been uh, taught that
Hmm.
they need to push their kids to college.
Hmm.
So therefore, if they don't, I mean, this is something when I was talking about parents about the high school equivalency, and I think at least half of parents very uh, how to say, uh, they definitely, the answer is definitely not.
Hmm.
They would
Hmm.
never allow them kids to get the high school equivalency because that's considered a dropout.
That's right. Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that's not the case anymore. In the past, maybe,
Hmm.
and like I mentioned earlier, if I have talked to some entrepreneur, I mean, employers and people were hiring people, they said actually they value more of people who have the high school equivalency than just the high school diploma.
Hmm.
Because when you get high school equivalency, that means you put in the work, you have the motivation, you have the work ethics to get it
Hmm.
done.
Hmm.
So that's something that I think parents needs to realize that we're definitely living a totally different world. So the school that parents went back in like 20 years is totally different than what's
Hmm.
happening right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's something that we definitely need to keep in mind
right.
is that, yes, the
And
the
also
the nature.
economy, right? And also the economy has
Hmm.
changed.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Good point.
right. So, and they said that we now do have many options out there. And actually, I think next week I'm going to interview someone who has been in the homeschool movement for many
Mm,
years. So
great.
she will provide. Actually, Indiana is really a good state
Hmm.
to
Yes, it
do
is.
homeschooling, and it's actually a lot easier than most people think. Most
Yes.
parents think. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree.
And definitely the kids. Uh, uh, I mean, at least I know many kids they really thrive in that environment.
Oh yeah, I have made comments to people all the time in my second year now of teaching in a coast school that I'm at, which is made up of all homeschooled kids. That on average, my high school kids tend to be about 2 to 3 years ahead
Hmm.
academically
Right,
of where my kids were in public school.
right. I'm not
And they
surprised.
enjoy it too. I think by and large they really enjoy the freedom and flexibility to be able to learn in a way that best suits them. They get the best of both worlds. They get to attend a school where they can socialize, but then throughout the week, because I see my high school kids 2 days a week, my middle
Hmm.
school kids one day a week,
Okay.
that they have the rest of the week with their family to be able to again go out into the world
Right, right.
and
Yeah,
learn and socialize, and yeah, a lot of
yeah.
great stuff.
And also that counts on, if you want to follow the state standard, that counts on your critical hours. I mean, the
Hmm.
hour you spend, right? You go
Hmm.
to nature study, you mean polar biology, or you go visit some historic sites. I mean, that counts as history.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
So I mean, kids
absolutely.
definitely. I mean, in a way, well, we actually this is the society we're in. That's we see problems, but a lot of problems is as parents we just don't spend enough time with our kids.
That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. I agree. And that's something that we can be critical of the public school system for what it does, but yes, there are many things that as a community, whatever it is that drives you. For me, and I think for you, it's our faith in our church and
Right,
our faith walk, and knowing that we are a part of a community of like-minded believers, that we need to take that message out and reach out to people and help correct some of the things that we see going on in society.
right, yeah. Well, thank you so much, and
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to see you again October 9th
yeah,
during
absolutely.
the conference. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it's gonna be a lot of
nice
fun.
talk to you. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, same thing here. Okay, I think we will definitely will talk more in the future, and
Mhm.
yeah, and actually, I got some good news today from. Have you heard about Apprentice University?
Yes, I have actually.
Okay, and Angie Morel, who actually worked there, or I mean, has been there since the very beginning. So she reached out to me today. We had a good chat about the role that the um, apprentice university they can play.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I don't know if you know they are going to have a new space.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I know they have the office in Brownsburg.
Right. So they moved
So
out
yeah.
from there.
Okay.
Actually, they have a new. It's close to I think 31st Street and on the west side of it, close to the
Oh,
Eagle
okay.
Creek. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty. There are a lot of room now.
Yeah.
So
Fantastic.
they are definitely wants to help students, not parents,
Hmm.
to for the different kind of try out different kind of education models.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great news. Glad to hear that.
Yeah. So she was talking about they might they are considering put up some kind of conference or workshop, and so to get people together and talk about, okay, what are those different education models out there, and how do you do it?
Yeah, very good. Very good. I'm looking forward to hearing what the results of that will be.
Yeah, all right. I'll see you on the 9th.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you again so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.